Hello and welcome to another episode of Outcomes from the Counter podcast. I'm your host, Jon Grice, and I am excited you're here. Thanks for joining me today. I want to talk about MTM. Now, that sounds pretty obvious coming from somebody at Outcomes, but it's been a trend I've been starting to notice, and I thought, let's talk about it. And if there's a chance to get ahead of it, it might be in everybody's best interest that we have the conversation. So I had the privilege of giving a talk on Saturday for a CE session about clinical services, about MTM, about how to make a pharmacy successful doing MTM or what that stage looks like. Before me was a presenter from Equip, and she talked about their platform, how it works, how it connects pharmacists. Another platform I've known and watched is CPESN and the programs that they do, the contracts that they are helping pharmacies get connected to. All three of our companies, Outcomes, Equip, CPESN, each of these folks are trying to connect pharmacies to the customer that we don't always think about. In pharmacy, so often we are, of course, looking at the patient, right? They're the customer right in front of us in the store. They are the obvious one that everything revolves around, the care, the medicine, the billing, and all that. Except it's not everything. When I said billing, the big part of that is the insurance company. And so, what are the insurance company's needs as we all are working on helping the patient? Uh, that's a real thing. It's a big thing. There's a lot to it. And when you get to know and talk with insurance companies and find out how invested they are in the health of the patient, you realize they're another stakeholder. And for any new pharmacists coming out who haven't had that realization, please do, get to know the insurances, what their structures are all like, how they set the business up so that ideally it is getting the best outcomes, the best health for everyone as economically as possible. Anyhow, MTM is designed with that goal, right? We want to make the best use of the medications that we dispense, that our patients use, and that the insurances are paying for. And so partnering with them to find out who are those patients that you want us to give the most attention to is kind of the whole business plan behind Outcomes, or at least how it originally started. MTM helps reduce costs and improve care. So let's set up a business that contracts that formally and makes it an official process that insurances can now pay for. Prior to Outcomes existing, this was all just done over the counter as pharmacists were able to make time to talk with their patients. And 25 years ago, that was feasible. And it was great. But we were all doing it and living by the margin created by the dispensing. And that's not there anymore. It doesn't cover enough time for the pharmacist to talk with the patients as much. So anyways, that's why Outcomes is here. That's what we are trying to accomplish. And I think reconnecting ourselves as pharmacists with that idea, and again, if it's not a reconnecting, it's a new connection being made, understanding what our insurance companies are needing from us as pharmacists, I think is a really key point, a crucial issue at this stage that we're at. Dispensing has been fully commoditized. Clinical services are still recognized as very important. But I watched a webinar last week where it wasn't even mentioned. So a pharmacy owner, was given a talk on how to implement clinical services in your pharmacy. We went through a number of great areas, different service lines, different products to recommend, sell, all those good things. And didn't disagree with anything that this person said, except for the fact they omitted MTM completely. There was no mention of CMRs or tips or enhanced services like CPESN contracts. So the whole Outcomes or other clinical services contracting entity was completely left out of a talk that was supposed to be coaching an independent pharmacy listener on how to implement clinical services. And I thought, man, that's a big miss. Um, I sense in the industry, and this was another conversation I had. I had reached out to a good friend, trusted mentor, somebody I highly respect in the pharmacy industry. And so a voice that I wanted to hear from on this topic. And I think as he and I talked through, where pharmacists are at right now, one of the things that is facing us that we have to recognize as a mental battle might be the wounds that we have from being mistreated in a lot of contract negotiations over the last 20 years. A lot of pharmacists feel like they have had their business taken from them or their negotiating power eroded underneath them and not been represented fairly, either to the insurance companies or just by the insurances themselves. And so we've got kind of a divide right now. Maybe it's not in every every pharmacy operating space. Maybe it's isolated to retail, maybe even isolated to independents. But there is a us against them feeling out there. And I think it's going to be tricky to overcome. But even if we can't overcome it, I think it's something at least worth addressing as a point to be aware of. Be aware of your own cognitive bias when it comes to, do I want to help the insurance company take care of this patient? Because if the answer is no, then you might be directly harming your patient just because you don't think you can trust their insurance company. And I'll be honest, guys, I'm an independent pharmacist who was displaced from ownership because the margin in my business sank. So this hurts for me to talk about because it's real. But I also have to look at the reality of the landscape and go, okay, what does the patient still need from me, from us as pharmacists? And how can I make sure that my pharmacy is open another year to provide the same thing or better next year for them? Well, I've got to watch the business end of things, no doubt. Also, clinical care is a big piece of how that happens, and getting paid for it is the only way that I know I can prioritize it and give it the time that the patient needs me to give it, so that they can get the benefit. So even if I am accepting money to do clinical services from an insurance company that I already maybe don't like because I feel like they have been underpaying me on the dispensing side for too long, I've got to find a way in my own brain to separate the emotions from the logic and say, okay, but what's most important? I still need to make sure this patient gets the clinical care, even if I can't quite see the path to where, well, they eroded the margin on the dispensing, but they're paying margin for a clinical service. How is that not the same equation it always was before the margin of the dispensing eroded? Maybe we will look back on this last about 10 years and actually be able to see a pretty intelligent design where the margin slowly eroded while the clinical services were being expanded. And I think that's what we're going to see. That is what history will end up saying about these last 10 years that we've been through. But I recognize there are folks who can't see that yet, and we're still mad. Mad about how badly margins in pharmacy have become. But, and I say but one more time, to draw us back to what I think is the reality, where the margin of dispensing's gone, but it's in the clinical services, and we just have to recognize it and do them. And I think as pharmacists, we've got to be able to recognize the way that our own wounds of the past, trauma responses, however you like to talk about it, our biases are keeping us from seeing reality through a clear lens. Our own anger at what we didn't like as the changes were happening is keeping us from embracing the good sides of what is available to us now. So I'm going to invite Lauren Adair to join me. She's from here at Outcomes. She puts out our State of the Network every year. Just an expert from my perspective when it comes to what's going on in MTM, who's doing it, who's doing best at it, why are they good at it. And we're going to have a talk next week about that to try to get an understanding of how does it work well. If there are chains, independents, everybody from all different walks able to do this. And when they do it well, they say, we want to do even more next year. Okay, there's something there. Teach us what's inside that model. Why does that work well for them? So we're going to have Lauren join us next week, talk more about the state of the network, her recent report that just came out. But I'm going to try to address this piece that I see as a gap in our current understanding of the landscape, so that all of us, whether chain or independent alike, we can all see it, MTM for what it is, and hopefully grab hold of it with a fresh perspective and say, this is something that matters, and I'm going to find a way to get it done. And maybe, hopefully, my business will flourish as a result of it. And obviously, my patients are going to benefit because I know what happens when I spend time with them. So that's all I got for you this week, guys. Chew on it, ponder it for me. I'd love to hear your feedback. I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you're thinking. Reach out. Let's have a conversation, and maybe even before next week, give me some questions you want me and Lauren to talk through. What is it? What are we not maybe seeing that we can help answer or dig into? So join me next time, and thanks for tuning in. This is Outcomes from the Counter.